I have an extremely important guest on Triumph Talks today. She is gorgeous inside and out. Becky Rasmussen is the public speaker, social advocate, and minister who helped establish Call to Freedom in 2015, an anti human trafficking organization based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Call to Freedom offers services to women victimized by human trafficking. Becky draws on her experience of over 10 years working with nonprofits and ministries, as well as her 12 years in mainstream media, television, and marketing to help Call to Freedom create a safe haven for victims and to build awareness of the grim reality of human trafficking. Becky oversaw the writing and publishing of this important resource guide for parents who may have a child who is either at risk of human trafficking, has been rescued, or may still be in bondage of trafficking or sexual exploitation. Call to Freedom's resource guide quickly became a #1 Amazon bestseller when it was released. Becky, thank you so much for coming today to talk about your book and the important work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having us, Melanie. And we're just really excited for the opportunity to spread more awareness on the issue of human trafficking and commercial exploitation. So thanks for having us.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an honor to publish your book. I really enjoyed working on it. There's so many facets to it. I know the first question that I always ask when I start a show is, why did you write this book? And I know that your book has many contributors, but if you'd like to kind of dive into that and explain how it was put together and why you published this book.
So we've been working with survivors of human trafficking since 2016. One of the things that we realize, not only is the victim victimized within this circle of human trafficking and commercial exploitation, but the parents are too. And
Mhm.
we began to navigate cases with not only the individuals, but their family were at a loss. They didn't know what to do. They had a lot of questions. A lot of times they would actually react to each other in a negative way. Both parties needed support in this process. So I went to Ruth, who is really the mastermind behind writing this book, and I asked her, will you be willing to put together a resource guide for parents so that we're able to equip them and support them in this process as well, as their child was healing? And as she started writing this resource guide, it just started coming together as a book. And they actually came to me, Mary and Ruth, and said, hey, we really need to publish this. I think it would be a great resource for individuals and parents, not only affected by human trafficking, but for trauma as well. And I was a little resistant. I didn't think we were going to actually develop this into a book, and that was not an original intent. However, within the next couple of weeks, I started getting calls from all over the United States, from Florida, Michigan, parents in situations that they didn't know how to navigate, didn't feel like they had the support within their community, nor understood what was happening to their loved one. And I knew at that time that God was calling us to do something else and to publish this book. And so our hope is with this book that it gets into hands of every parent so they have a better understanding of what human trafficking is, but also that they're not alone.
That is so important. What you just said about it going to every parent. It's really not just for parents who have a child that's involved or just coming out of it, which it very much is for because it um, gives so much help as to what to do when that's happened. But the truth is that this kind of crime and this kind of trauma is so widespread, and all of our children are at risk. And of course, you've done a great job of explaining that in the book as well. So it's a pretty big market that you need to reach. But I think that there's a lot of awareness growing thanks to your organization and the types of advocacy that you do, so that parents understand that that is a book that they need to read, even if they don't know that their child is in trouble yet. Just as a parent myself, I know that we're all afraid, and I think it helps a lot to curb that fear, to have that
Absolutely.
resource. I'm so glad that you published it.
Yeah. I think knowledge is power, right?
Mm.
And if we're able to equip not only parents, but individuals with the power of knowledge, how does this work? what is potentially happening to your loved one in the midst of these circumstances. It could be grooming, it could be the actual human trafficking, it could be exploitation. It's really hard to grasp how this circle of victimization works, and that's what we wanted to do. We really wanted to provide the resource to bring that knowledge so there isn't that fear surrounding the issue of human trafficking and even social media, commercial sexual exploitation, and sextortion that's happening quite frequently today.
Especially with the technology that our children have in their hands at very young ages. It's so easy for the predators to get to them. And they manipulate. You have a whole section in your book about manipulation. And it's so important to understand how they groom and how they manipulate because it's so subversive sometimes that even an adult can be manipulated with the tactics they use and not realize until it's too late what's happened. Would you like to just talk for a little bit about some of the contributors, at least how they contributed and how the book came together? I think it's so interesting the way that you did that.
You know, our whole continuum of care model, that the services that we provide to those that have been impacted by human trafficking or commercial exploitation at Call to Freedom, has been developed by the journey of survivors.
Mhm.
What we wanted to do is, this is a new social injustice. It was put into federal law early 2000. There aren't a lot of anti-human trafficking groups doing, hands-on work because this is so new. So there aren't models out there on how best to serve victims of human trafficking. And we just knew that our best development and our best contributors would be those that were impacted by human trafficking themselves. And so survivors really came alongside us to be able to offer their lived experience and what would help them in the service area. So when we started writing this book, I knew that's the perspective we wanted to continue. That's how Call to Freedom was founded, and is also how Call to Freedom will continue to develop to be one of the best anti-human trafficking service providers in hopefully in the nation. And so, with that being said, that's really what this was. It was lived experience by Ruth, who was actually the first grandmother, the first survivor to ever walk through the doors of Call to Freedom. She was her
Oh,
grandmother,
wow. Oh,
and
that's
um,
amazing.
it is
Wow.
amazing, and to watch the family, I actually worked personally with her granddaughter and herself navigating her case
One of
and
your
walking alongside
oh,
both of them.
look at how
I
far they've
knew
come from
I
there.
and
Amazing.
actually doing very, very well today. And we're grateful for the grace of God in that process. And Ruth just learned, she asked a lot of questions. She wanted to be the best resource for her granddaughter that she could
Mhm.
be. And so she not only would come to us, but she would actually go online and research to find answers for herself where she could. And I knew that there was a gift there because many parents walk through the doors when their loved one is being victimized and they don't have hope. And
Mhm.
so, not only from her perspective of lived experience, her research that she did to help her own granddaughter, but also the work that she did within Call to Freedom to help navigate other parents' situations, really was a unique perspective that needed a lens to be able to write this book and to have it be what it came out to be in January of 2023. And
Yeah.
then Mary is also a survivor. She likes to call herself a thriver.
Mhm.
And she works on staff here at Call to Freedom, but she has been journeying with Call to Freedom since we began. And so Mary has really been a contributor to not only our continuum of care model and the development of that, but also she brought her lived experience of the trauma she experienced and integrated her personal story into the writings of Call to Freedom's A Parent Guide to Understanding Human Trafficking and Healing Their Children. And so that unique perspective from not only a service side, but also from that lived experience really is a unique collaboration that brings I feel a full lens to what this victimization looks like, and also what victory can look like on the
Yeah.
other side once you get through this trauma.
Yeah, that's what's so great about it, is that it is this collaboration. It's from people who've experienced it on different levels, because to have a grandmother that's helping a granddaughter is a unique angle, and then someone who's been through it themselves. And we're gonna have Ruth on soon, so this is an opportunity to kind of pitch for that. People can come back and watch her interview and hear what she has to say about her input. Um, And it also allows the reading to be very interesting and easy. I know that you focus on keeping layman terms rather than being, it's not a clinical book, which is good because the clinicians need to know what they're doing, but I think when it comes to everybody, we just kind of need to hear it the way that will help us the most. So on that, that's kind of a segue into my next question for you, to just get kind of specific about what you hope people will take from reading this book.
I have always, my heart in this, in to provide services has always been that nobody feels alone, that everybody feels like they have a hope, have a future, no matter what circumstance you're in. And so, really, we wrote this book because we wanted parents and even loved ones that are victimized throughout this process of human trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation or sextortion. All of it is quite rampant today, that they found hope and that they knew that they were not alone and that they were able to identify with somebody else's story, and they were able to take that and use that as a strength to be able to navigate their own trauma. And it also is a prevention book. Our hope is, we never want to see anyone in those situations of human trafficking, commercial exploitation, or sextortion. Our hope is that this will give you insight to prevent and maybe help safeguard your home as well. Maybe in some of those areas, like we talked about, from social media to the grooming process. What is consent? What are healthy relationships? How do we define what this looks like? And how do I know when to intervene if I feel like something is off? And so our book was really designed not only to bring comfort and support to those that are in it, but also for prevention as well, to educate. And again, knowledge is power. The more you know about these issues, the more you're going to be privy to some of the techniques that are happening within our communities, but also within our social media platforms as well.
So it's been, as of this interview, it's been out just a little over a year. You had a best-selling status coming right out. I know you had a big event that you presented it at. Have you seen it in use? And are you seeing some of the feedback that your goals are being met? Do you have any insights into that to share?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited that it's getting in the hands of the people that need it. And the response has been great. The reviews have been very, very positive.
Mhm.
And I really, our goal is, again, is we wanted to be able to be there when people needed it so they can Google. We've really worked on our SEO. We've worked on making sure that if people are in need and they are searching for resource guide for human trafficking for parents, that this book shows up, and that has been a gift. You never know how God is going to use something, and it may be for the one or it may be for many. And for
Yeah.
us, if it's just one, that's okay. And that's why we were called to do this. Our hope is it's for many. Our hope is that this continues to have an impact not only this year but years moving forward, as a support to those that need it most. Everybody
Mhm.
deserves hope. Everybody deserves to understand that they're not alone and that their experience is not immune. And
Yeah.
so this is a epidemic, and I'm going to call it an epidemic, because it is growing at such an incredible rate right now. 12 Anywhere from 12 to 27 million people are pulled into modern day slavery today. Less than 1% of victims are ever identified. But also in that, this increase of sextortion that we've seen, where we saw actually from October 21st to March of 2023, the FBI and Homeland Security received over 13,000 reports of financial sextortion. And what we're seeing because of that is victims, almost 13,000 victims were identified in those cases, and majority of those ended up in suicides because individuals did not feel like they had a way out of that situation. And that is our hope, that this will not have a shelf life, that it will reach every one of those individuals, and in order for them to know that there is help out there and that they are not alone.
Yeah. That's so critical too, because the type of um, experience that it is, they can feel they're intentionally made to feel isolated. and pulled away. And it comes with shame. Not that they deserve the shame or they should be ashamed, but shame is involved in it, and that causes people to feel like they are alone. And so I hear you repeat that, and I know why you're repeating that, because
Yeah.
that's probably the primary problem with reaching them and helping them to say, you know what, this is common. What you've been through is, I hate to use the word normal. It's really not a normal thing, but unfortunately, it's so common. It's almost a normal crime to be concerned about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of this is that all of these victimizations we're talking about, this is a business.
Mm,
Their
yeah,
one purpose for them is to make money.
yeah.
And it's off of manipulating people, manipulating that they
Mhm,
loved them, they cared for them, they were somebody they could trust in many different forms. And of course, you feel ashamed because you believe that that person really
mm,
cared for you and had the best interest for
yeah,
you. But this is a billion-dollar industry and people are making a lot of money off of victimizing people, and that's not okay. And nobody
yeah,
should ever feel that, yes, their trust was betrayed. Yes, that person lied to you, but they've done it to many people, and you're not alone in those situations. And
mhm,
our hope is that we never have a family that doesn't get the resources. Our hope is that we get to every family that they don't have to feel like they have to take their own life, because that is happening and that's
mhm,
not good enough. And so
yeah,
understanding that you're not alone and that this is a business and these people are actually doing it not just to you but to many other people.
yeah. It's just so important to talk about because it is growing, and the numbers that you
Mm.
just gave, as far as how many are found, 3%,
Less than 1%.
oh,
Yeah,
less
the
than
number,
1%.
less than 1% of victims are ever identified out of
Oh,
human
okay.
trafficking
Yeah,
situations.
that is,
um,
and then when we're talking millions, many, many millions, and less than 1% is just, that is heartbreaking right there. So the work you're doing is just so extremely important. I'm grateful for the chance to have helped you with the book, and especially grateful for the opportunity to bring light to it in this platform. And I hope that we can continue to do that. I'm looking forward to my interview with Ruth. Maybe we'll get some of the other contributors and even bring some of the lessons that are within the book, because we talked about manipulation, grooming, what things to look for, how to be aware if you have a child who is being trafficked, because it's not always just, it's something you can recognize, but you have to look for it too, because they're not likely going to come and tell you. And
no.
so there's so many lessons in there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to.
Victims rarely come out and say, "I'm a trafficking
Yeah.
victim." And that's because sometimes they don't know because of the manipulation and grooming, and
Hmm.
other times there's things in the background that they're holding over them that they're fearful to talk
Yeah.
to you. And you know what?
Yeah.
They trusted this person, and that person obviously didn't, took their trust and betrayed that. So why would anybody else be any different? So it's really
Yeah.
hard for an individual to trust moving forward after that victimization. And that's part of their grooming. That's part of
Yeah.
their technique. And they can control every aspect of your life, from your personal identification to where you live, what you eat for that day, what you wear for that day, and you don't even know how to function in normal life because you've been so controlled. And so their
Yeah.
techniques are very advanced, and people that you wouldn't think get groomed and recruited into these situations often.
Yeah. And as a parent, they need your book, because they may not understand the psychology of what's going on in their child. And it can be frustrating to, because I've seen this. I've worked with your organization and Hands of Justice as well, and I know that often the victims will go back to the one that's abused them, and you don't understand it. And so parents and loved ones and people trying to help them need to understand the psychology of it, so that they can say, okay, it's not that their fault that they're drawn back, whether it's because there's coercion or just the love bombing and the trauma bonding, I guess is what I mean, that has connected them so tightly to somebody. That there's definitely some really important things to understand in order to process the um, the healing, and that's what your book does as well.
Yeah.
So Did you have something more you wanna add
Yeah, I
to?
was gonna say the journey really begins, working with survivors, they don't like the word rescue
Mm,
because they think, "Okay, yeah, you maybe got me out of the situation," so that we refer to that as rescue. However,
mhm,
that's when the journey begins.
mm,
It's really, really difficult to get
yeah,
out and then start life over again, and so the term rescue isn't something we try to use. We try to use help navigate them out of situations, those situations, and then come alongside them to be able to continue to do life and to heal from what they just experienced. And that in itself is a long time journey for
yeah,
individuals
and
because of
that's
the
what everybody
complex
needs.
trauma.
That's what people need to understand. It's a journey, and it's a long one,
A
um,
very long
and we
one.
have to be patient, and it's a cycle. It's a circle sometimes, yeah. So, I love to ask this question because I'm talking to authors about their books. So just I've got your book over my shoulder here, as you can see. I love it, and I want to just bring up the question of what's actually that jumped ahead. I'm sorry, clicked the wrong one. How did you come up with the title of your book and the cover? I think that the cover art obviously is very significant. I'll bring it back up, but would you just kind of share a little bit about those decisions that you made for the book?
Yeah. When I started Call to Freedom in 2016, we focused on women because everybody branded that it's women that are trafficked, girls that are trafficked.
Mhm.
And then we began to live life with survivors and realize it isn't just girls. It doesn't have, there are so many different demographics that are affected and impacted by human trafficking, commercial sexual
Mhm.
exploitation, and also sextortion. That the book was really to say, you know what, we have different, we have a young girls, we have young boys, and then we have the one that isn't heard, that is potentially missing, but they're still valuable. And so what we want to do is create that there is no demographic, not one demographic that is affected by human and trafficking. And so, as well as that, even if somebody is missing, they still have value and we're still going to go after them. And so, the book was titled A Parent's Guide to Understanding Human Trafficking and Healing Their Children. Because A, you got to understand what's happening to you. And then B, we need to talk about what are the next steps to get you beyond the victimization that you just experienced. And there is healing, no matter how deep it is and how painful it is and how difficult it is. Once you're out of that trafficking situation, there can be healing, there can be victory, there can be life after that. But you're going to need a lot of support and a lot of understanding. And our hope is within the title of this book, it allows parents to say, hey, I don't know what just happened to my child. And that's exactly what happened to Ruth. She followed me to 3 speaking events when I started Call to Freedom. And in those scenarios, she essentially said, my daughter is, they told me she's a victim of human trafficking. I don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
And that began a journey of understanding what human trafficking was and how she was even pulled into that circumstance. Her granddaughter was. And then we began to navigate. Okay, now we've identified it. You have understanding of potentially what happened to your granddaughter. But now we're going to talk about how do you move forward. And there were a lot of different dynamics within her granddaughter's story that made it really difficult for the family, but also for her granddaughter. And so,
Mhm.
understanding those scenarios moving forward, and then also having the support and the understanding to be able to navigate some of those difficult situations in the midst of trauma.
Wow. So I'm sure there's potentially other organizations who have important causes or projects like you have that may be watching you and saying, we should probably publish a book about this as well. So my final question is, what advice do you have for other inspiring authors, or in this case, maybe other aspiring organizations who want to follow your example and create a resource guide or something similar?
Yeah. I would say, if you feel called to do it, find a good publisher like Melanie to come alongside you and help navigate that. But also just take the time to really research and know the topic. And, if you feel called to be an answer, write a book, be an author, take that lived experience in those life situations that you've navigated. And I really feel like just on our personal journey at Call to Freedom is those lived experiences, those real life stories, but also the lens of somebody who has come out of those situations is so helpful to putting together a really thorough book that people can relate to, but also people can, take and be able to apply to their life as well. So, encourage you to. I never thought we would be in this situation. And I feel like God calling me to do it again on the story of Call to Freedom to inspire other people to step into their calling. And I do believe that if you feel called to do that, somebody needs to hear it. And it doesn't always have to be a bestseller. It may be that you're just going after the one, the two, the three to impact somebody's life. But, if you feel called to do it, I highly encourage you to find a good publisher like Melanie and her team that come alongside you and make it very easy to bring that to life.
Thank you. These are your answers to all these questions are so just amazing, and I just love you. You are amazing. The pictures at the start shows all the fun that you have. I mean, some of those
Yeah,
pictures
you're
are
seeing all the fun. There's another
yeah,
side to all of
that's
this too. So
behind the
being
scene
honest
part.
with your life, but no,
No, and that's
um,
important too. I mean,
oh,
honestly, that's probably a really important point to bring up
it's
is that
it's difficult work. There
yeah,
is there is really probably a reason there aren't a ton of homes and groups doing this work because
yeah,
the trauma is complex and it's hard. And sometimes you don't know how to navigate situations when it comes to cartel and some of these other scenarios that you can only make up in movies. And so for us, you see all the fun and we've been very blessed to be able to help over 1,200 individuals since opening the doors of Call to Freedom, building a home that actually houses women and their children and giving
you've
women that are
done that.
coming
You
out of
built a
human
home.
trafficking situations the
Wow.
ability to be reunified with their children and to
Wow.
see that joy of a goal that they had that they never thought that they could achieve and playing a small part in making that a reality. We wouldn't give it up for the world. And our goal is to reach as many individuals that need help as possible. And that's why we're here.
You are so amazing. I feel to ask you one more question as I
Yeah,
listen
sure.
to you talk, and I know you are a go-getter, and you need to be. But what is it that brought you to this organization? Because you're not a victim yourself.
No,
So
I am not a survivor.
so
I've
how
been
did you get
survivor of other things in life, and so
mm.
Mary, our lived experience survivor, she actually goes, "You could be a survivor. You have some insight." But no, I don't have a lived experience. I actually feel like this is a call from the Lord. How Call to Freedom came about was in 2015. I was in prayer, had encounters before, heard about trafficking, felt really drawn to the issue, wasn't the right timing, was in prayer of May of 2015. I felt prompted to get back involved. So I do what everybody else does. I Googled anti-human trafficking in South Dakota and I Call to Freedom luncheon popped up. And so I ended up attending that luncheon and essentially Call to Freedom was a program under another nonprofit. So Tapestry International was functioning as Call to Freedom through a program under their nonprofit. And so I came alongside them and I just served on their board, ended up fast forward to August of 2015, and it was on an outreach in Sturgis, South Dakota, which is our Sturgis Rally, which is the largest event in South Dakota.
Mhm.
And there were about 500,000 people over the course of 10 days doing bikes, activities throughout Sturgis. And we were doing outreach, promoting that if you are purchasing somebody for sex, it may be not a willing individual. And so we
Mm.
really wanted to educate individuals on what trafficking could look like. And I just got connected with a young girl and when I was out there and her name was Marissa, which Marissa's house is named after, and made about a 10-minute connection with her, introduced myself, and come to find out Marissa was a missing child. So that was August of 2015. A group called Free International was in Sturgis doing a search and rescue the same time I was there, got connected with them, and found out that the young girl that I had met that day had been missing and had been found. So she was missing. She was found in October of 2014, went missing again in May of 2015. And I began to ask the questions, how do you find somebody and then how do they go missing again? And
Mm.
they began to tell me that there are only 298 beds in the United States for victims of trafficking, and that because of the lack of services, and the volume of what the human trafficking and how it's happening, that they were very vulnerable and they were being recruited back into human trafficking situations. So I took that back to the director at that time and I said, I don't know what God's calling me to do. You don't have encounters like this and just go to sleep at night and be okay and walk away. And she said, I feel God is calling me to transition Call to Freedom to you. At that time, I was a single mom. I had a job, one paycheck. None of it made sense. But I knew when I got back in the car and I drove from Sturgis, South Dakota, back to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that God was talking up, showing me a mission and showing a vision that we stepped in today. So I worked two jobs for about a year and 4 months, doing both Call to Freedom and my other job and being a single mom. Founded Call to Freedom and established it as a nonprofit in January of 2016. Opened our first office March of 2017. Simply volunteers for the first 2 years. November of 2017, we hired myself and a grants writer, stepped out in faith, and we're 27 employees now, two
Wow.
offices, and we've served 1,200 individuals that have walked through the doors of Call to Freedom. So if you feel called to something and God makes it very clear that it's his calling and he makes it very clear that it's his timing, there's a grace that goes before you. And there really has been a grace on Call to Freedom. And I'm so grateful for that grace because I don't think I would do this without it because we wouldn't experience the success that we've had. And we know where that comes from. Again, Call to Freedom is continuing to grow. I do believe that at one point in time, we will be taking our model, which is our continuum of care model, to other organizations and other states to help equip them to serve victims of human trafficking.
That was gonna be my next question, as,
I read your
waiting to
mind.
get yeah, you did. I am so glad I asked you that question,
Yeah.
honestly, I think that was the spirit guiding me, because it just really came to me strongly to ask you. I'm so glad because that is I hope people stick around long enough in this video to hear that part of your story because that's the that's where this becomes Triumph Talks, is to really see that the God gets involved and blesses and prospers your efforts, even when you're just and the story of Marissa, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how few beds, how few resources for such a it's probably the biggest, isn't it the largest growing crime,
Yeah,
of all?
second largest. I
Second
don't think we have correct stats. I think we're
I
struggling
think it's
with
gotta be
less
the
than
largest because
1% of victims are ever identified. We
yeah.
don't have correct stats. We're
No,
not
because I
identified
know
these
cartels
victims.
are moving away from drugs and into trafficking because it's a product they can resell instead of something that's just a one-time use, and so
And it's
I
very
think we
difficult to prosecute. So
ugh,
I don't have an actual possession or distribution product. A human being can be sold over and over
yeah,
again. And sometimes human beings aren't good crime victims in cases either because of the mental health, the addiction that they're
yeah,
introduced to or forced upon by their trafficker. So
yeah.
it is growing at a
Well,
rate
and I
that
know
I don't
many victims end up in prison, and that's something we need to raise awareness of too. Just because to society, to the outside world, they look like criminals themselves. Oh, that girl went and got the other girl brought in. So, or she's a drug addict, or she's a whore, or whatever label
people
that
can.
makes them go to jail and prison. And we are literally assisting the abuse of
Yeah.
these people by not providing them with the resources and instead labeling them criminals when they get caught up at that level of the process,
Yeah. Forced criminality is real.
oh,
And then
yes.
also the byproduct of
Yeah,
trauma and making decisions is real. And
yeah.
so we actually go into the women's prison
Mhm.
And we have outreach within the women's prison and to the jails
So
across the
glad
state
to
of
hear that.
South Dakota. And we see a large number of clientels that have gotten lost in our systems, and that's a
Yeah.
whole nother show
It
that we
is, and
do as
let's
well.
do it. I am passionate, my call is to do this. My call is to publish books, to now I really felt called to start this channel because there's just such a huge opportunity to get the word out through this platform. Billions of users on YouTube. So, let's hope that this show starts to reach even a 1% of the billions, we'll be doing really good. But
We so
thank you so
appreciate
much
the
for coming
opportunity to
on.
share.
Absolutely. And let's see if we can get, well, I know we're going to get Ruth on, and then if you'd like to come back, I'd love to be able to say, hey, we're gonna dive in a little deeper to some of these topics because I know there's people that need to hear it. Of course, buy the book. I will put the link for it in the first comment of this show, as well as a link to your nonprofit. And just out for anybody out there that's watching this that might be dealing with it on some level, please, or just want to add your thoughts, please make a comment, share your experiences. We'd love to see that. We'll interact with you. It's a great way to reach out. And of course, if you like this show, give it a thumbs up. It helps more people find it if you do that. And then be sure to subscribe to the channel, because if you do, then we can also spread this message much more quickly. So thank you again for being on. Do you have any final thoughts?
Just thank you so much for spreading the word. Again, knowledge is key. Even if you're not in this situation, pick up our book, because you might help not only prevent a situation, but help somebody else as well.
Yeah, that is true. Thank you. Well, hopefully we'll see you
Thank
on
you,
here real
Melanie. We
soon.
appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.